to the tutorial on injury reporting. Just a quick overview of your responsibilities. If you are the PCBU or employer, you have a requirement to report any serious and life-threatening incidents to your WHS regulator. So this includes death, serious injury or illness, and a potentially dangerous incident. If you also have employees, you must keep a register of injuries and illnesses and have workers' compensation and a return to work program. So in this tutorial, we're going to cover incidents, injury and illness recording, and workers' compensation and return to work. First of all, incident management. You should actually have an internal process to record all incidents, regardless of how big or small they are. The only way you can improve and prevent these things from happening is to record them, investigate them, and reduce the risk. It's also important to note that injured workers, when they present for medical treatment, either at a hospital or, say, to a doctor, must obtain a work cover medical certificate and give this to the employer as soon as possible so that they can follow that up with their compensation provider. So the regulator is usually notified when a worker is treated as an inpatient, as in an inpatient in hospital, as in they are admitted to hospital, or if it's a notifiable incident. Let's step back and run through what you need to do as a first response to an incident. First thing you need to do when you're told that an incident has occurred on your farm is make the area safe. If you've done your first aid training, you know the Dr. ABC, which is danger first. So what you need to make sure is that the area is made safe so that no one else is injured. So this may involve turning power off, turning water off, or turning a grain flow off to make sure that the injured person and the people providing first aid are not injured. So once you've made the area safe, you need to make sure that the injured person receives first aid or medical treatment. So this may involve some immediate first aid and calling 000 to organise an ambulance. This is where you'd activate your emergency plan. Once the person has been treated, you would secure the incident scene. So what that means is just leave things as you find them. Now, securing the incident scene doesn't prevent you from moving things around if you need to do that to administer first aid. So at this point, you would work out whether the incident is serious enough and warrants reporting to your regulator. If so, you would report to the regulator, and we'll go through that next. And finally, make sure you record it in the Register of Injuries. So when do you report to the regulator? If anyone is admitted to hospital as an inpatient, then you must advise the regulator as soon as you have made aware of it. And if there's any immediate treatment for an amputation, a serious head or eye injury, a serious burn. So a serious burn is one that would require hospitalisation or a skin graft. If you can treat it with simple water, then that's not a serious burn. Separation of skin, a spinal injury such as an injury to the spinal column. This doesn't include a back strain. The loss of a bodily function includes loss of consciousness, but this doesn't include, say, a faint. Serious lacerations, and usually this is confined to a laceration that requires deep tissue damage and lots of stitches. And also medical treatment by a doctor within 48 hours of exposure, say, to a chemical. You also need to consider serious illnesses. There's a huge list here. So if anyone gets a serious illness from exposure to bacteria, viruses, blood or body substances, anything around handling animals, animal products, and particularly zoonoses such as Q fever, anthrax, and the rest as per the slide. So it's not only injuries that need to be reported, but also serious illnesses. So the final category is a dangerous incident, and this includes the near misses. This can include an uncontrolled release of a substance, a leakage, explosion, implosion, gas, steam, electric shock, a fall or release from a height of any plant, a collapse of something, failure of an excavation, inrush of water, mud or gas into workings, tunnels, channels, a range of things. The best way to look at this one is If you have an incident and the potential is that someone could have died as a result of the incident, it probably should be reported. How do you report? Now, each regulator in each state and territory will have a specified number that you need to call. So once you've recognised that you need to report, you would call their 1300 number. On the screen is the New South Wales number. You need to report within 24 hours. What you can expect is it will be an answering service, which is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you report, they'll ask your details of your name, your role, your address, your location, the name of the person injured or persons injured, what happened, and any witnesses. It's also important that once you've reported it, that you do not disturb the scene of the incident unless the scene is released by an inspector. If you have a serious injury or illness, most of the time an inspector will come out to your site. Now, depending on where you are, it will depend on how long that takes. You can also expect a visit from the police. Often a notification, particularly of a serious incident, to your regulator will trigger the police to attend the scene as well. Don't disturb the scene and follow the instructions of the inspector. Police will arrive and they are usually looking at ruling out a criminal act. So they may arrive, but you need to keep things in place until the inspector arrives. All workplace injuries must be recorded. So you need to make sure that you've got the name of the injured worker, the worker's address, the age, the occupation at the time of the injury, what they were doing, what industry they were engaged in, the time and date of injury, nature and cause of injury. Now, this is your minimum legal requirement that you must record. If you have paid employees, regardless of the state or territory, you must have workers' compensation insurance, and that compensation is then used to pay their wages if they're unfit for work and also cover medical expenses and their rehabilitation. As well as having workers' compensation, you must, if you've got employees, have a return to work program, which consists of a policy and procedures to help injured workers with their recovery and getting them back to work. The earlier you can get people back to work, the more successful their rehabilitation will be. So it's best to focus on what they can do rather than they can't. It's not optional. If someone is injured in your workplace, you have a legal responsibility to rehabilitate them and get them back, if possible, to what they were doing before. Your workers' compensation provider is a really good resource for helping you work out suitable duties whilst this occurs. Good return to work is based on really good communication with your provider and also with the injured worker. To sum this one up, you must keep a register of workplace injuries for workers. There actually are legal penalties for not keeping this register. You need to know what incidents must be reported to your WHS regulator. It varies slightly from state to territory. The best way to find this out is to check out what's required on the website. The website will usually have a summary of incidents, injuries, and it will also have your regulator's phone number, a 1300 number that you need to contact them. It's a good idea to have this handy. You don't want to be looking for this phone number when you're actually dealing with a significant injury or illness. If you're an employer, you must have workers' compensation if you've got paid employees, and you must have a documented return to work policy and procedures.